You guys are always asking me, get somebody on the channel that has a different opinion with you. Folks, I try, I offer, I have offered $10,000 for charity to get some of these folks on the phone. But you know what? Melody Wright keeps coming back. She has a unique set of experience that I do not have, that we all need to be paying attention to. Melody, thank you so much for coming back to One Rental at a Time. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you for having me back, Michael. I think it's really important for both sides to keep talking to each other.
I agree. I think the value comes when people are when they disagree, but can stay respectful,
Correct.
which I appreciate. Well, the
Yeah.
first thing I want to get into, because we haven't talked since January, is about your area of expertise. Again, for folks that don't recall, you spent a lot of time in the lending game, in the workout game, and you pay special attention to FHA delinquencies, 30, 60, 90 days. This is where problems will probably show up first. This is where you have experience and I do not. So please catch us up what's happened roughly through the first half of the year.
Sure. So we've seen delinquency remain sticky. And so, last year we were seeing delinquency go up. And when I say last year, I'm talking about in December 22, we started to see delinquency go up, but then we had tax and bonus season, and that largely got caught up in the spring of last year. Then in June, we started to see people crossing that 30 plus day delinquency, which we call the death cross, because that's when you're giving up on your credit. And it's a real decision. I mean, because people often will do everything they can, sell plasma, whatever they need to do not to cross that threshold. And we started seeing those tick up this time last year, actually. And so what you've seen happen this year is we saw a tiny bit of catch up, not as much as we did last year during that bonus season. But what we're seeing less of right now are cures. And what I mean by that is you will get people that get delinquent, but then they cure and go back because there's still $5 billion of homeowner assistance funds out there.
Really?
Meaning, and
Still?
oh yeah, it might be like
Wow.
3 billion because they're like a
Billions,
quarter
though. Yeah.
behind in reporting. But essentially, like I see it in my client books all the times, borrowers are getting reinstated or caught back up by homeowner assistance funds. But what you're finding is that those numbers are becoming less and less and less. And delinquency is getting stickier. Black Knight just did their mortgage monthly monitor, and in that, they also they said delinquency was down, but they said, but we're not seeing cures. And that is really a big warning signal for people that aren't paying attention. For FHA specifically, this just doesn't make any sense. If I was a regular consumer or a regular consumer of information out there, I'd be like, what do you mean 1 in 10 FHA borrowers are delinquent? A population that's doubled since 2009. Well, and they had the COVID forbearance, which is 18 months of, they didn't have to pay. Then they could put it in the partial claim, put it at the back of that lien without any interest actually accumulating to be paid off when they sell it or pay off. Or they could do a 40-year mod, which everybody thought was the cure for some reason. That thing can't cure anything. Looking at those make me absolutely nauseous because the payments barely go down and you're adding 10 years to the back end. So, and everybody just thinks, hey, it's temporary. I'll refi, I'll do XYZ, it'll all be fine. But the problem is those options may not be available because by the time that maybe they can refi, they can't even afford to close anymore. And so what we're definitely, and by the way, Fannie and Freddie are also joining the party. What happens with Fannie and Freddie, which we call conventional, is that they're much higher balances typically. And so you can hide the distress for much longer. But the other thing that I talk a lot about, Michael, is that we don't have the full picture. So we have the Fred series that shows us delinquency. That's for commercial banks. As we know, lending transitioned from the banks to the non-banks because of Basel III and heavier capital requirements.
Mhm.
And so then you have Black Knight, who they say they have 80% of all servicing that they're tracking. Great. Well, who do you have, Black Knight? Because the product mix makes a difference. Do you have a lot of the specialty servicers? Do you have a lot of the banks? Well, they won't tell you, but you can look at a schedule and, depending, I don't know if I can find it in time, but I can bring it up for you. There, you look at a schedule of actual delinquency by servicer, and this is put out by Inside Mortgage Finance. And sure enough, you can look at Chase. It's tracking the Fred schedule, which by the way is at Q3 2006 delinquency.
Ooh.
But yeah, exactly. And and I started in Q3 of 2006. That is when I started, and my job became watching my
Yeah.
books, watching their credit scores go down, watching their home equity go down, their loan to value go up. And they weren't doing anything. It just, the home prices were correcting, or started later, much later to start to correct. And so, we're basically in that same spot if you look at the banks. But when you look at the non-banks, you can look at specialty servicers like FCI Lender Services. They service, your non-qualified mortgage, which that's so supposedly your private,
Mhm.
market. And they also service private note sales, a market that no one has been able to size or scope or understand. And I'm hoping to do so at a conference at the end of this week. But you look at them, they're at like 32% delinquency. You look at like specialized loan servicing, who I used to work there. They have a mix of like government product, but they also are a specialty servicer. Like a lot of times what your banks will do is they'll send off their really bad stuff to a specialty servicer because they just have those. Well, they're at over a 7% delinquency. Black Knight's tracking around 3 point. I forget because I just think it's silly because they also don't include foreclosures in their overall delinquency rate. Now they say that in a footnote, but just so you know, that's
Yeah.
that's how they do it. And I think it's about 3.6 or something like that. But my point is, they had way less than what they have today. So when you look at their historical numbers, they're not representative. And so maybe they have 80% of servicing today. I would question. I know some of who they don't have, and it's important. Let me just put it that way. That's important. And I think that we're not seeing the full picture. So, as much as everybody is out there in the press saying delinquencies are at all time lows, I think that's largely because we are missing huge chunks of the picture. And I can see in my client books that delinquency is getting sticky. And I know that was a really long answer, but it's
No, it's
also
great. That's why you're here.
complicated.
This is a part of
Yeah,
the business that I have zero experience in, and frankly, don't want to get experience in. So I love the education, the insights. I mean, there's a lot that you said there that I want to go poke at again,
sure.
just to kind of dig into just a little
Yeah,
bit more.
absolutely.
So earlier you said we're at 2006 delinquency levels. For folks
For
that
the
don't
commercial
remember,
banks. Yeah.
right? For commercial banks, just for folks remember, 2006 wasn't a particularly bad year for real estate.
No.
That was like, to your point, that was like, that's where the domino fell and it started to get worse and bigger dominoes fell into '07, '08, '09. So hence the comparison.
Yep.
What was the, do you remember roughly what the peak was like at the absolute worst, '09 or 10, whenever that was?
In terms, so this is what other people, and this is, I was going to actually try to find this presentation to bring up some slides for you, and I will while I'm talking. But actually, delinquency peaked in 2010, but it chopped until like right at that same level until Q3 2012 when the auction started in earnest, when the investors came in buying up those delinquent properties. That was when you
Yep.
started to see meaningful decline in delinquency. And so everybody kind of thinks of like 2008. And I'm like, it's no, no, no,
That's
no.
not eight. No, it's not
And
eight.
yeah. And I've been doing, I have a combined sales schedule where I have new and existing as well as home prices. And in reality, I mean, in 2006, everybody thought everything was fine.
Yeah,
And
no, yeah,
even in
yeah, 2006 was
2007
a
as well.
good
Yeah.
year. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it wasn't 2005, right? Which just went off the reservation. But everybody in 2006 was still feeling great. I mean, they
Yep.
threw a party. I went to it. Balloons were coming down from the ceiling. There was a life-size Lego house that we were all walking around. And I mean, it felt like Enron. Everybody was celebrating.
Oh,
That
yeah.
that was October of 2006. I mean,
Oh,
people were
that's funny.
still celebrating,
Yeah,
and
we're still
that's where
drunk.
delinquency was.
Yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah.
so, you know, I think that's an important lesson, and people just they kind of forget what history was.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've given you the ability to share whenever you find the PowerPoint,
Okay.
feel free to share it. But I actually, there's one thing that I think is way different this time from last time, but I
Okay.
want your opinion on. And it's
Absolutely.
funny. It's funny. We're talking about '06. As I recall, the 2006 vintage of mortgages was the worst ever, but we didn't see it until '08 and '09, right? Because a lot of them had that 2 year, interest only, neg am, just toxic of all toxic stuff. We don't have that today. The toxic products are illegal. Most of the loans are fixed, right? We don't have 51% variable. We have, I don't know, 3, 4, 8% variable. Not that there's not pain, but it's not the debt that's going to blow up and suddenly make it unaffordable. Is that fair?
So, Michael, I definitely was in this camp up until probably 20, early 23, late 22, early 23. I was like, I don't care about mortgage. I wasn't talking about mortgage. I wasn't concerned about mortgage. I believed in all the credit quality gospel singing I had
Mm,
been doing, everybody else had been doing, because I was a part of trying to make things better. For years, I
right.
spent my entire career just trying to clean everything up. So I thought I had done a good job, right? Well, then I started like peeking under the covers and started looking at early payment defaults and
Mm,
really getting into the nuts and bolts of the automated underwriting systems. And then I started looking at how much FHA had increased. And then I started looking even under the hood more of those FHA requirements where, you can have a 580 credit score, put 3% down, get a down payment assistance because we've got just as much money as we had in homeowners in down payment assistance. And what I'm seeing my books, Michael, is like, so we have government subprime now that's very different. And I'll talk about the non-traditional products because we have those too. But we have the government subprime where I am seeing left, right, and center 2022, 2023 borrowers, late
mm,
21, boom, 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 going
wow.
delinquent just like that. And so when you actually look at the schedules
Mm,
right now about who's rolling to delinquency, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can.
should be able to.
You're gonna see that it is those folks. And are you seeing? Hold on one sec.
Not yet.
I am sorry. Here we go. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. So this is kind of what I was talking about. The Black Knight is at
Okay.
3.2.
Hmm.
This schedule up here was the commercial banks.
Okay.
You can just see it. So like right around here and here we are at the same
Got
place.
it.
But what's interesting is you look at delinquency by product and by interest rate. And so
Mm,
yeah, of course, we got the 8.5%. That's really, looking pretty ugly there. We got the 8 to 8.5 ugly. But then look at your next highest level kind of under all of this.
mm,
It's your 5 to 5.49. So
interesting.
that was in 2022.
Yeah, you're
So
right. Yeah.
what we can see is that those later vintages, and I'm trying to get this same schedule pulled out by vintage year. I'm only kind of saying that because based on what rates we're doing at the
Yeah,
time,
it's reasonable. Yeah, it's reasonable.
right?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out this back end system to pull it. But yeah, so per Black Knight, this is the highest delinquency cohort. And so I think that's very telling. Now, to go to the non-traditional products, so we had the DSCR loans. A lot of people call those non-traditional. You
Hmm.
you have the bank statement loans where I mean
Sure.
I've sat in these shops. I've overheard these conversations. You put $20,000 in and out every single month for 6 months, they're going
Hmm.
to think you make $20,000 a month, and they don't care. They don't
Yeah.
care. They're pushing
Yep.
more people in.
Hmm.
And then so that's what we know about. That's the non-QM space where they're absolutely doing what I would call non-traditional products. We
Sure.
also
Absolutely.
know, yeah, credit scores were inflated because of the not reporting of, all of these various delinquency events.
Hmm.
But then let's talk about private notes. And
Okay.
these guys, Michael. It's the sub two. It's
Hmm.
it's these people that are doing seller financing. It's people that are cold calling. They're using something like Property Radar. They're getting
Hmm.
addresses and phone numbers of people where a notice of default has been
Yep.
filed. And that's the other thing that I forgot to mention about delinquency is that all of the agencies are also doing non-performing loan sales.
Oh,
And so what
wow.
they'll sell them out. And so the most recent buyer of the last Fannie Mae deal was Pretium. Okay.
I don't
Everybody
know
should
them.
know who they are.
I don't know them.
They play around in single family rental.
Okay.
But the deal with them is when this happens, you're basically told you can't foreclose for 2 to 5 years, depending on which agency, what the
Oh,
terms are.
wow. Wow.
And so
Okay.
this has been going on since 2015. This has in essence been going on since 2012, but we've made it systematic. So HUD calls them single family loan sales. They do this for just the regular non-performing, but they also do it for reverse mortgages. And in fact, if you're looking at this left-hand,
Hmm.
graph, there's this thing called FHA project. They don't tell you what that is, but I'm fairly certain that's from the failed reverse mortgage lender
Oh,
right
wow.
there.
Okay.
And that's what those are at a 16% delinquency.
Hmm.
But, my point being that like we don't know true delinquency. We don't know what we haven't had RE real estate owned the way that we did before because they're slow rolling. They figured out how to mitigate the losses to the banks and the agencies by doing these sales out to the private market or to nonprofits that are backed by sovereign wealth funds.
Mm.
And this is how they keep kind of delaying the game. So, but coming back to non-traditional products, again, those private note sales, I believe. So I'm going to be meeting with the conference organizer on Thursday of this week. But just talking to him, this market could be as big as a trillion. And if you think about the biggest origination year we had in mortgage, it was 4.4 trillion. So if this market is at that size, and what we're hearing there is that delinquency is increasing, then there's a huge chunk of the market we don't know yet. So I think, Michael, we're going to wake up and we're going to say, okay, yeah, they weren't playing in the regulated market because they
Hmm.
figured out they couldn't. They
Right.
created their own marketplace.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, we talk about FHA, Fannie, Freddie, single family homeowners. They can get in for 3.5%, 5% down, right? Conventional stuff. This non-QM, DSCR, bank statements, usually 25. I'm sure you could find some that would do 20% down, but these are not the same kind of LTVs as a conventional loan. Is that fair or no?
Oh boy, Michael. No, I
Way
mean,
wrong? Okay.
oh gosh. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
I could probably
Cool.
send you email solicitations.
Wow.
They went to about, I'd say 15% last summer that they
Okay.
did. They like kind of tightened things up and said, but they were doing,
15's the tight? Oh my goodness. Okay.
oh yeah, they were doing
Wow.
tens, they were doing arms, they were doing interest only. I
Not
mean,
good.
you go diving into these non-QM securitization schedules, Michael, like on Fitch, they're doing it all. It's
Okay.
all the same stuff. And it's hilarious because and this will bring me to that Freddie program. It's like everybody but you and me and a couple other people have forgotten what happened. And so they're like, "Oh, let's do second liens. That's going to work out well for everybody." Meanwhile, you also have another article about zombie foreclosures in the same week, which are those orphan second liens that my company, we sold them for 10 cents on the dollar. They're orphaned out there all over I mean, I still find them today and they
Wow.
can foreclose. And a lot of them have been waiting and waiting and waiting for exactly this moment
Yeah.
where it makes sense. So I just think what's happened is people are fighting the last war. They're
Mm.
looking in those places. They're not really looking in these other kind of, newer places for this information. And I think that people are going to be surprised that there's been a lot of things that have made that delinquency look lower. And we won't have any idea about it and probably
Yeah.
until November, I'd say the 15th or something like that of this year. So
Oh, what happens in early November?
I don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know. It's shocking.
Yep.
So it's really funny. So I think there's a lot there. And again, that's why I love having conversations with people that are knowledgeable. When I look at conventional market, I don't see the same setup. So it's nice to get your opinion about some warning signs there. But your point about the DSCR, the non-bank, whatever the heck you want to call those, potentially being $1 trillion, I would have never guessed that. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
not guessed it was that big. So that, because again, I know these guys, or at least I know some of them,
Right.
and they're not all great operators. We'll talk about one thing at the end of the show that I sent you a tweet on or a text or whatever on. But yeah, there's some real pain coming in I'll call the non-banks. So if I were to categorize the pain level, I think the non-banks could be a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Again, my naivety or whatever the heck you say that word, for conventional kind of FHA is more like a 3 or 4. I could be completely wrong, but that's I see non-banks being more problematic than traditional. Kind
Mm.
of round that out. That's my opinion anyway. Make sense?
It makes sense, but with FHA right now, which is different than Fannie and Freddie, like you're saying, we're already at over 10% delinquency, which that was the peak in Q3 2010. And so was at that around. So what I think for those conventional borrowers is barring some sort of productive new employment that we're going to get out there. What I'm seeing in my client books is the property taxes and insurance are
Oh, yeah,
crushing them, and they can't afford it. And they're trying to get caught up and they're trying to get caught up, but they can't. And then they turn around and try to sell. And,
yeah,
most of the markets are frozen at this moment. I mean, there's some on the move, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them are still on the buyer seller strike.
yeah.
They just, and they're like, oh crap. Well, so that equity looks great on paper until you
Right.
need to access it.
Until you
And a
need to
lot of
sell.
them
Yeah.
can't actually afford to refinance even into that higher rate because they
Yeah.
can't afford the closing costs.
Yeah. Totally get that. I am curious the more and more I play with this. 1 in 10, that's clearly alarming. I'm gonna guess, and again, I have no idea, probably oriented towards a couple of states, i.e. taxes and insurance. Probably Florida's high up on the list. Texas probably high up on the list. I mean, in California, where I am, I've had some of my insurance go up 40%.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Prop 13 protects that other side. Um, but yeah,
But if you're a recent homeowner and you missed that
oh,
supplemental tax roll, you are in pain right now. Yep.
yeah, yeah, definitely in pain. But I mean, I don't know if you have the data down to that level, but if I were to guess the most problematic state right now, it's probably Florida first, Texas second. But again, I
Are
don't
you
look at it that
talking
way.
from delinquency or
Yeah,
just the increase? Yeah.
delinquency.
So actually, your southern states, like I say southern, but your Mississippi,
Okay.
Louisiana,
Louisiana.
those
Yeah,
states, like you are seeing increase like over the average delinquency in places like Dallas and things like that. But in reality, you've got your biggest delinquency are in those poor, very poor southern states, and it's kind of creeping into
I did
Texas
read
and
that.
creeping
Yeah.
into Florida
Okay.
because they're not number one right now, but they're they're not at the bottom either. So they are. It is higher there, but
Gotcha.
Mississippi and Louisiana always take the cake.
Got it. Okay.
So
That's good to know. I had read that. I had forgotten to read that. Louisiana was, I think, number
most
one.
people forget about the state where I was born, Mississippi. Though.
Oh, not on purpose. Not on purpose.
No. I
Uh,
mean,
I
I
know.
try to
I'm just
forget it
teasing.
too sometimes, but I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Mississippians. Proud of where
It's
I was
just a
born.
joke. Just a joke.
Yeah.
Just a joke. So actually, I want to go back to something I think we closed on in our conversation in January, where you gave it wasn't an official forecast. It was just, off the cuff. And as for memory serves, you thought 2024 might be a down year of 5%, but you were really pointing at 2025 kind of being where we're going to have to pay the piper. We're roughly halfway through this year. Just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I finally got a hold of 25-year history on existing home sales and new home sales, and I've been doing some really fun data modeling. And prices rose during the worst year of the GFC. So did sales. I mean, this is a very seasonal business. However, they butcher the seasonal adjustments and the
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
So I still believe we will be down. Now people are like down year over year. Yeah. I mean, we're going to be, I believe that overall in aggregate, we're going to see a home price decline of approximately 5%. Now, if you're looking at Case Shiller, we're looking with their results today. That includes sales as far back as November, and it could even be even further back because of the delays at the county and the way they get that data. And
Okay.
so I think that what Case Shiller is showing us right now is actually that increased activity at the end of the year because it's an index, it's not a
Sure.
absolute series. So that is showing us the momentum that we got picking up at the end of the year. But
Okay.
what you're seeing, like so I track 82 cities and I use Redfin data as a way to try to see how my cities do to the national averages and in different
Mhm.
indices. And so month over month for my cities, we had the only difference was a 0.04% increase month over month for my
Okay.
median income for my cities. You look at new home sales, we essentially saw a revised up increase and then a decrease. That was some craziness,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at NAR, existing home sales. We're looking at that home price being up, but not still reaching its seasonal high of last year, which happened in June,
Mm.
or the high back to 22. Now we might hit that. I don't know, but with the kind of what I would say with existing home sales is they didn't knock it out of the park.
No.
The
Yeah.
series seasonally adjusted. They said it came down. I don't care what they say. We still had year over year and month over month increases in existing home sales, but they didn't knock it out of the park to their average. We're tracking. And if you actually look at 2007, things didn't diverge there until August. And I
Mm.
honestly think that that's what we're going to see is something very similar that might
Cool.
even be starting right now. And so I still think we'll see a low, like a small drop, and it might be less than 5%, but that's kind of where my head
Yeah.
is
I
right
like it.
now.
Yeah. I like
And
it. Eh,
but in 25, yeah,
That's the
it's
pain.
a bloodbath.
A
So
bloodbath. All median price across the country. Some states worse than others. I'm guessing. Just kind of historical stuff.
yeah, yeah, and but I mean, there won't be a ton of people that are immune, and I think the other thing people forget about July of 2025 is that, the 3-2-1 buy down started in earnest in July of 22, and so you're really
Mm.
gonna start to see these things resetting very similarly to they're not arms. Everybody always says, "I know they're not." I mean, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're very this rate will reset. And if
Yeah.
people they haven't been able to refi yet, and if they can't
Mhm.
refi, that's going to be a shock to people, and that is over a year from now to come.
Yeah.
So
So let's play this out a little bit. Again, I think to your point, I think the second half of 24 will be, I don't know, worse than the first half, which is kind of seasonal. Makes sense.
oh,
Uh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, seasonal. I've been calling flat for a long time because I think we got all the appreciation in the early part of the decade, and we got to pay for it, right? And that means flat. Flat
Right.
being, yeah, whatever. Um, but let's play with 2025 a little bit because again, a bloodbath um, likely means we probably have an official recession. We probably have significant job loss. The consumer pain that we talked about for the first 20 minutes is now like front and center. But we also know that the Fed will, my opinion is the Fed will react if that happens.
Hmm.
And by react, probably 100 basis points, maybe 150. They're not going to keep rates at 5.5% if all of that other stuff is going on. Um, so, let's play with, again, we're just friends here guessing. Let's say mortgage rates are 5.5%. Does that stem the tide at all? Or still, once the momentum goes, you can't stop it?
Well, it's the people at 5.5% right now that are defaulting the
Good
most.
point. Good point.
And
Good point.
so I think if you got it down to 5%, and I stole this, but I kind of agree with it from Ivy Zillman. I think if you get it down to 5%, then the struggle between buying and renting kind of
Okay.
changes. And it's like,
5%. I like
yeah,
it.
around 5%. That was her when she did her rental survey and rental study. She said, if mortgage rates came down to 5%, that's when it's all going to change and where it's going to be cheaper to buy instead of
Okay.
rent. And
Okay.
so I think because of the supply and because everyone has kind of misunderstood supply, And I think that a lot of that has to do with NAR trying to remain way more relevant and make us believe that they are way more relevant than they really were.
Yeah.
We know this. We've seen homes go for sale in 2 hours on Facebook, never hitting an MLS. So I think that people have misunderstood inventory. And so as this multifamily comes online, and of course, like you said, we know this is local. Every city will be hit differently, but there are just so many, Michael. There's so many. But we're gonna have so much multifamily. We're gonna have so much long-term rental. We're gonna have so much that build for rent. Plus,
Mhm.
we're gonna have those 15 million vacant properties from the boomers that they don't want to carry anymore because of the carrying costs. Like all that's going to happen at the same time. And so I don't believe that that 5% interest rate is going to help if mortgage rates, if the 10-year actually cares what the Fed does. And there's some arguments that it might not care as much as it used to.
True.
Um,
Yeah,
and
there's some
so
arguments.
I just don't think that's going to help.
Mm.
Will asset holders be able to refinance if they can afford it? How many people are going to be able to afford it by then? How many of these property owners who, we just saw that big mortgage backed security for the property in New York, everybody below AAA got
Yeah,
wiped out. Like,
I saw
so
that.
how many, like, and if you drive around this country and you go to these cities and you look around at all these vacant buildings, like, so how many people are going to be impacted in their own finances because of these things? So I just don't think the Fed's going to be able to stop this train. I mean, I
Okay.
don't think what they do is going to matter at all at this. I mean, this could make it worse. Don't get me wrong, but I just think this is we've gone beyond the pale at this point.
Okay. All right. So Bloodbath 2025. I like it. Let's talk about this Freddie Mac thing.
Yeah,
For folks that don't know, Freddie Mac announced the desire, I guess you would call it, to create a second loan product only for Freddie Mac loans, at least initially. Who knows if that might
initially.
change? Yeah,
Yeah.
might change. But yeah, they're looking to allow mortgage holders who have equity and don't want to sell or do a cash out refi to get a Freddie Mac second. Um, drawing a blank on her name. What's her name? She thought there'd be $1 trillion to $3 trillion unlocked.
Oh, sorry. I just screamed at you. I'm sorry.
It's a
Meredith Whitney.
Whitney. That's it. Meredith Whitney.
I'm so
Meredith.
upset with her that that's why I screamed in my mic, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the program, and then could you fathom $1 trillion to $3 trillion coming out of Freddie? Yeah, I just doesn't make sense, right?
No, so there's two parts of me. There's the realist, and then there's the person that's emotionally just upset that anybody's going to talk about second liens after what we went through. I mean, I just am, and it's all just to goose their income statements. They want the fees. They want it. It's an addiction, like an addiction to crack. All of the non-banks want it. What the banks are arguing is that, hey, we've got HELOCs. We're good. You need to go where that market's working fine. They're our baby. Go away. The non-banks who are dying because they don't
Mhm.
have that machine running anymore,
Yep.
and that paper's over so much. They need that transaction. They need that little penny on every
Agreed.
dollar to keep coming through. And so if Freddie would decide to buy these in the secondary market, then the non-banks could play. The non-banks can't play because they don't have deposits. And
Right.
so they're beholden to the banks and those very large warehouse facilities for everything that they do. And by the way, when there's repurchases and not a lot of origination, suddenly you're pledging crappy assets. And you need to be able to borrow more or it just won't work. And so then this is what the non-banks want, and so do the agencies, because this is a way to just keep the game going, keep the game going. And the banks don't want it. But by the way, neither party is thinking about the consumer, not in any shape, form, or fashion, and what this could do to them. Now, that's the emotional side of me that's like, I can't believe you a-holes. I cannot believe this, right? The realistic side of me is like, okay, for the people that this could actually help, most of them are not going to qualify right now. They can't even afford to refi. Like, it is too late. And so this reminds me very much of HARP.
Mm.
In that case, the rates were already low, so you could do that. In this case, they're probably the rate will be a little lower that they do this product at.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I've been asking someone to give me what their potential pricing and interest rate is going to, I haven't heard anything yet, but I don't think there's any way we would get that much money into the economy through this program. But of course, if Freddie gets here, Fannie will be here
Oh,
like
Fanny's
right
coming.
behind him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny when I look at this program like you, I have an emotional response and like a logical response, especially when I heard Meredith Whitney pipe off that there's $1 trillion coming. Like she said $1 trillion by August. I'm
Mhm.
like, are you freaking kidding me? I would,
Like who was paying her? I just it is one of the most bizarre things I've ever
yeah,
seen,
it's
honestly.
wild. Yeah.
Oh,
So let's step back. Again, I like you, I have an emotional side. You and I both experienced, we saw so much pain last time. I do not want to go through that again. Don't
nope.
want to go through it again. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. The Freddie Mac program, at least as I read it, is not as insane as last time, right? It's only on Freddie loans. We'll talk about that in a minute because you're probably the only person that knows this, but we'll give something to the audience in a minute. It's capped at 80%, how I read it. So we're not going to 100 like last time or over
Right.
100. So that's better. Um, I have been told, I actually talked to a couple of lenders, they're thinking that Freddie will be in the eights. You can get
Okay.
something today
Thank
in
you
the
for
high,
that. Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
in the nines or 10. So there'll be a point lower than you can
Yep.
get today, which again is it's some
It's
savings.
something. Yep.
It's something, right?
Right.
And oh, by the way, their point was if Freddie comes out in the eights, other banks will bring theirs down. They'll never be as low as Freddie, but you'll see we're being greedy today because there's only
Oh
one
yeah.
game in town.
Absolutely.
They're
Yep.
being greedy.
Yep.
Um,
Always.
so it's yeah, always. And the other thing to point out, which you brought up, you can get a home equity line, and there actually are seconds today, but they're
Oh
just
yeah.
more expensive. They're double
Yeah,
digits,
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So then I come back to, oh my God, we're doing this again,
Right.
right? The thing that really happened in 03, 04, 05, 06, this was before the pain. People looked at their houses as ATMs.
Oh yeah.
That's what transpired in 02, in 03, in 04. And then the lending institutions came on with increasingly toxic lending procedures and all of that, that ultimately transpired in this big blow up that we call the Great Recession. Um, I don't know that Freddie Mac's program standalone is more than a fart in the wind. It's certainly not $1 trillion. It's going to help some people. They probably would have gone somewhere else anyway. Let them save some money. But to your point, what happens next?
Right.
Danny, her big brother
Right.
or big
Right.
sister comes in.
Right.
And all the other lending institutions. So to me, Freddie Mac's program by itself, standalone's not a problem. It's what it signals, having been through 02, 03, because you're going to do 80% today. Well, somebody's going to do 85. Somebody will do 90. And then somebody will do 90. That's like, do we really want to go down this process again? So I guess
And
at the end of the
in a
day,
potential home price deceleration,
to your
because that
point,
is
yeah,
exactly what
yeah.
we did last time.
It's like, why are we
It's
doing this?
right. And it's like because it's 80% today, but if you're in Fort Lauderdale,
Ooh, yeah, look
you are
out.
gonna be down a bit more than that
Yeah,
probably
you could
here
be
at the end of
underwater.
this
Yeah,
season. And so that's what happened
you're
so
right.
quickly last time. And by the way, everybody forgets we've already done equity withdrawal. It's just
Yeah,
nobody's talking about it. I mean,
yeah.
1.5 million borrowers took the payment deferral, which was the workout for
Oh,
the forbearance.
yeah.
And so you can 18 months of payments, Michael, in California. I mean, that's
That's no
about
joke. That's
50,000.
that's
Right.
50
Yeah.
grand. Yeah, that's 50,
Yeah. So
maybe
that's
more.
50 grand. So think about that of your 2002, 3, 4, 5. Because in essence, what we did instead of waiting, instead of them asking for that check or putting their debit card into the
Mhm.
ATM, we just gave it to them
You
this
gave it to
time.
him. Yeah.
And so that $50,000 is sitting at the back of and you're now seeing on social media people going, wait, what is this thing? Because they just
Mm,
signed, they signed. And servicers can't, they don't do a good job of saying, here's your combined loan to value. This would
yeah.
remind people of piggybacks,
Yep.
silent seconds, because this is what
Sure.
it is. It's not recorded, it's a silent second. And so for 1.5 million borrowers, we've already done equity withdrawal that nobody is tracking. You can't find it in the numbers. You can't
Mm,
they stopped doing the Fed report, so we don't know
that's
how
a
much
good
it
point.
is. But
Yep.
I can look at it and I can tell you it's not insignificant for the borrowers that I see every day. So there's that. So,
Hmm.
and then that's what we were, some of us from inside, like servicers, like the 10 of us that understand all this stuff, we're joking. It's like, is Freddie going to want to be in a third lead position? Because in essence,
Yeah.
it'll be a third behind itself.
Well,
Um,
let's talk about the
yeah.
little tweak in Freddie's program that I think you're probably one of 10 people that probably caught it. Freddie Mac only wants to put a second on there
On,
first.
uh-huh. Yeah. But
The
guess what
reason,
they'll do, Michael? I'm
all right,
sorry.
tell me.
I'll
So,
calm down.
yeah,
Go ahead.
so the reason that that's important, or at least to me is important, is it means that if they have to foreclose, they don't have to negotiate with anybody else. A lot of the pain from last time is when you had a first at bank A and a second at bank B, they didn't agree on whatever the haircut was, and which led to more losses. If Freddie's the first and Freddie's the second, that makes it a lot easier process to clean up and foreclose. Is that fair?
Until they risk transfer, which is they already do that. They already sell like non-performing loans into different securitizations. They already sell non-performing loans. Do you think when they need cash, because by the way, they're
Yeah, that's
making
true.
money hand over fist right now, they are, but they still aren't meeting their capital requirements. And if they want to get out from under the thumb of the government, they have to do that. So don't you
Mm,
think for a minute that when they are trying, we're getting near quarter end, we need to make some cash. It's the
yeah.
same drug. I mean, it was Bank of
Wow.
America last time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just they're gonna sell them. They're gonna sell
Okay.
them. And
Uh,
and so I mean that could be 6 years from now, but I see it happening.
yeah. This is why you're here. This is the insight, the experience that I don't have. So I appreciate that. I want to
Thank
actually
you.
bring up what I sent you in a private note
Yes,
on
please.
text or Twitter because I think this is really important. This is where dude, we repeated the same stupidity and nonsense from '06 in a bigger asset. And we're going to go through that right now. So we have an entire market, AKA commercial real estate, that was taken over by bridge debt. I had a call with a bridge debt lender, somebody who manages portfolios the other day, and he said, Michael, there's entire bridge debt portfolios underwater. These idiots in multifamily did the same stupid stuff we did in residential in '06. Short-term variable rate debt based on stupid assumption. One example, Miami building sold in 2018 for 10.2 million. Makes sense. Sold in 2022 to 20.1 million, roughly a double in 4 years. Today, that building, because it was bought value add, which all these stupid assumptions were, is 80% occupied and falling. Nearly no value add's been completed. Best case building is worth 13 million as of today, which means everybody loses. And I did a quick back of the napkin math. I wouldn't write an offer for more than 9 million. There are LPs, aka equity, that are 100% gone. If you were using floating rate bridge debt to get your deals to pencil in 22 and 23, toast, gone, garbage, complete garbage.
Wow.
Just wild.
How much of how much do you have any? I can how much of this is out there? Like, if
Oh,
you had to,
it's if I had to guess, and I mean this with every fiber in my body, this will be worse on a dollar scale than the Great Recession.
yeah,
The dollar amount that will be lost in this crash in all of commercial, so office,
right,
multifamily, all that stuff will dwarf the residential pain. And the residential pain was no joke.
right,
This is going to be bad.
yeah. And that's my view. I mean, having visited all these cities, I often say I'm bullish bulldozers because, what we basically did in our hyper financialized economy is instead of like rehabbing old buildings that were, dwindling occupancy, the finance guys, the Wall Street guys, they just wanted the fees. So let's do a new project because we're going to make way more money on a new project. And so let me go to Dallas where I have all this empty commercial and build
Yeah.
these brand new towers nobody's ever going to fully occupy while I have all this empty vacant buildings all over the city. And then that just repeats all over the country. And so to me, I don't think it's just work from home. I think but part of hyper financialization, if you remember the scene in The Big Short at the very beginning where they just show all the buildings going up, right? Like after the 80s, like that's what this was. We never needed all that office space. Our demographics are declining, and you can talk about immigration, but I think most would argue they're already here. Like, so, that we're dealing with the current reality. So I just think this is, like you say, if, I mean, barring some exogenous event where some of these buildings disappear overnight, like this is going to be
Yeah.
very brutal, very
Yeah.
brutal.
And I don't know, the reality of this environment, if what happens, if whatever, if this goes down, the difference between last time is the banks took it on the chin, right? Because there was really no equity in these losses. Unfortunately, if I'm right here, there's 25, 30, 35, sometimes 40% equity in these deals, and they're gone.
Yeah.
That's real money, real wealth. And you can talk about being an accredited investor all you want and blah, blah, blah. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to disappear overnight. And
Right.
you're going to have a negative wealth effect
Oh
because of all
yeah.
of
Definitely. And nobody's talking about that because, the LPs, how many of these people, I had no idea, Michael, because they're not in my life daily until I probably did the Adam video and all these people started contacting me. And I was like, oh my God, this is everybody.
Yeah.
This is retail too. These are the people that, live on your street that had an extra 25, 30 grand that they want to do something with, but which meant a ton to them, but probably not so much to the general partners, and they were emailing me and saying, what should I do? We're not getting information about this rental. I for free, I would just send them a list of 10 questions, like ask them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these questions. I mean, it's scary. These are people's life savings. And it's
Yeah.
not just the Wall Street guys. They hook, line, and sinked
No,
some
this is the
regular
problem.
retail in there. Yeah.
Yeah, the retail investor got involved. It's just
Yeah.
same crap as last time.
Yes.
Anytime there is easy money,
Yes.
it's like the game of musical chairs, and all the chairs are
Yes.
gone. And now
Yes.
unfortunately there's a lot of pain coming. So I
Yes.
still think that's where the big pain is coming. I think
Yeah.
multifamily is down 28%, office down 30 something. I think more
Wow.
is
Yeah.
coming. Um, I think Resi again will be relatively flat. You're calling 5 and then 10. Totally respect that. Melody, you put out a lot of great content on your YouTube channel, a lot of stuff on X. Where can people find you?
You can reach me the fastest on X Twitter at M3_Melody, MELODY. And then, as Michael said, I write a Substack, M3 Melody Substack, and then YouTube, M3 Melody YouTube. So,
M3 Melody. Give her a follow. Reach out. Again, I respect her because she has the experience and knowledge. We respect each other. We disagree, and we still have a meaningful conversation. Melody, thank you
absolutely.
for coming back.
Again, thanks again, Michael. I think it's so important that both, we all keep talking to each other and we all keep listening. And you taught me a couple things today. So thank you so much.
You got it. Take care.